Hello. Um, so I was talking to a friend of mine, and he was lamenting and venting on some frustrations he's having. Long story short, he is going through an ego death, or some call it dark night of the soul. Um, so there's a lot of things around him that are really irritating and frustrating to him. We were talking about that. And we were talking about how much the mind will rationalize things and behaviors and stuff, which really is a function of the ego. It's in my experience, I'm by no means a psychologist or anything like that. But in my experience, what he's one of the things I've learned, is people are mirrors. And what I mean by that is, the things you recognize in people, the behavior patterns and the things that irritate you or that you like about someone else are the same things you like and dislike about yourself. So while this person is going through a process of an ego death, which essentially means this, you're fighting yourself. Okay? We all have a set of ideas, morals, ethics, beliefs, whatever, in our subconscious mind. And how those play out is through the ego and the consciousness. The subconscious always seeks to validate itself. Okay, so as all of this raw information comes in, the ego filters it through experience, which then passes messages back, and the subconscious then returns a message, you know, um, so forth and so on. I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty neuroscience of it all, but needless to say, there's an exchange. And this is usually what doesn't necessarily dictate your behaviors or your reactions, but it is usually the underlying motivating or sponsoring thought to a reaction. Okay. So somebody says something that offends you or upsets you or, doesn't align with what you think or believe, doesn't align with your opinions of what right and wrong is or whatever it is, you essentially have an emotional reaction and feel offended. At which point most people usually react in some kind of way. This is why they say, anger is a usually a secondary emotion. There's normally an underlying emotion or thought that would be considered like the sponsoring or motivational thought to that. So during an ego death or a dark night of the soul, as a lot of us call it, what you're fighting is you're fighting yourself because there's a part of you that wants to grow and evolve, but then there's a part of you that's trying desperately to hang on to what is known and what is normal and what you've done most of your life. So it's this constant struggle. And this is why you start to recognize all of these things around you, all these external things are being reflected back to you. You're seeing and recognizing behavior patterns that you've exhibited in the past that you don't like, that you no longer wish to be. And it's triggering you, making you irritated, it's making you frustrated, it's making you all of these things. Because there's a part of you that doesn't want to be that anymore. It's essentially the shadow self. Problem there is, and I struggled with this for years. Most people, they hear the shadow self or they think of the shadow side of oneself as a negative thing. And oftentimes it will display the more negative or malice types of behaviors. It's a survival instinct. Okay. And all of this is really just a higher level of your fight, flight, or freeze instincts, really. Um, it gets transmuted, filtered, and all kinds of other crap, but we're not getting into that. Um, in my experience, one of the better ways, instead of trying to suppress, block out, or destroy the shadow self or all of those things that you no longer wish to be or display, it's better to recognize that you no longer have to be that way. Essentially, integrate the shadow, love the shadow, accept it for who and what it is, and its purpose. Give it a purpose. It no longer has to be the forefront, it no longer has to be the main display. It can sit on the sidelines and be reserved for extreme cases of self defense and so forth and so on. It can actually be retrained to not be so harsh and so lashy and this kind of stuff, not be so directly malicious with its intent. But the important part there is to integrate it, to love it, accept it for who and what it is, accept the fact that this was how you were. You see a person who's cocky and arrogant, it just irritates you. Well, it's because you were like that at one point, and you no longer wish to be. That's why it irritates you. Okay, accept the fact that you were. It'll give you a whole new understanding as to why this person may be behaving the way they are anyway. It's also another step closer to learning how to unconditionally love people around you, which will also let you unconditionally love yourself. As within, so without. What you put in here and in here, you're going to see out there. Yes, it's an extremely simplified summary, but it's true. And this is what it means to truly surrender. You're not just surrendering to the process, you're surrendering to yourself, to your higher self, really. Because that's really what's fighting to come out. Your true, authentic self, your soul. You know, part of the ego death and ego function and reason it clings on tenaciously is because the whole purpose of it is to protect that inner self. Well, what you need to realize is that inner self doesn't necessarily need protection from external. Best defense is a good offense. And the way you have a good offense in this particular situation is you love yourself. You integrate all of yourself, the good, the bad, and the ugly. You start to love yourself unconditionally. Forgive yourself for not knowing any better. Forgive yourself for just repeating what was taught to you. And what will happen then is a process of surrendering or truly accepting oneself, scars and all. And you'll stop relying on external things to give you that sense of self-worth, productivity, love, because you'll get it from within. I will probably touch on this subject again pretty soon, and I will try to get a little more practical and pragmatic with it, give some better real-world examples instead of being quite so metaphorical and esoteric. Big change year. Like I said, we're coming out of the year of the snake. Time to shed the old skin.